Hey friends, thanks for joining me with the President and the Chief Revenue Officer of Oyova, Jon Tsourakis. Jon is leading one of the what I call role model agencies. They've been on the Inc. 5000 list in 2022. Not the first time that they've been there. They've won the, let me get the awards right, they've won the Fast 50 awards from Bits Journals. They have been mentioned the top B2B companies in Jacksonville 2021, top SEO companies. It's fair to say Jon and his team do things right. Jon, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure, Jan. Yeah. Thank you for the kind words.
You bet. And you deserve it because you've put a hard work into Oyova. And what I would love today is to shine a light on how you've gotten to where you are right now. What does it take to build a thriving agency that works from anywhere to 4-figure businesses to 7-figure projects on the website? Like, how do you get there?
Lots of mistakes.
I love it.
But I think the main thing is hiring good people, having good partnerships. My business partner and I seeing eye to eye on a lot of things, and treating your people well, treating your clients well, not being greedy, and having really good systems and processes in place, and being clear about expectations. I think that's another really important thing. Something I like to say, and a lot of the team have adopted, is I don't believe in surprises, good or bad. So if we say we're going to do something, this is that thing that we're going to do, and then you get the client to agree to that, and some wonderful things can happen at the end. You control scope creep, you make sure that the money is figured out, you can have direct conversations. So that's really important.
That is a fantastic point to start this conversation. I want to also talk about the hiring and systems and processes later on, but how do you establish the knowledge for projects so that you can set proper expectations? Because it's really hard sometimes to estimate how much a project will take and what goes into the project, and you can't really uncover all these hidden gnarly things sometimes. How do you make sure that what you tell a client happens is what is happening?
Be really clear about that. Be really clear about the things that you don't know, the unknowns, right? And it all starts in the sales process. We have a team selling approach. So that means from the initial call, we figure out, all right, is this going to be a good fit? And then from that call, we bring in the team members that would be working on that account. It's expensive on the upfront, but it's way more profitable down the line because you have a happier client, you have a happier team that are engaged. So in there, you're getting the experts that would work on the account. They're interfacing with the client, so you can see if there's a good fit there. And if there's unknowns, all right, well, we're going to get into the strategy and discovery phase and try to uncover as many of those as possible. And the ones that we don't know, we're going to just state, like, these are things that we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And we're time and materials. So, and that's not a gotcha for the client, but it's just being really clear, like, all right, as we figure these things out, as we build these things, you're going to pay for that time. Because if we're going to jump into something where we really don't know anything and then we're going to just make a bet with the client that we're going to get it right, well, that's all gambling. That doesn't work. And that's not a good relationship between an agency and a client. And if a client's demanding that, then it's probably not going to be a good fit. Now, on the flip side, if it's going to be a project, then you can estimate that project based on really drawing the lines in the sand, saying, all right, these are the things that can happen to achieve this. Be clear about the sacrifices that have to be made. They can't get everything. And these are really direct, professional, upfront business conversations you need to have with your clients. I think there's an inherent need for people in this industry, especially when they start, that you want to please the client. And that's okay, but at the same time, you should be paid for that. You shouldn't try to just go in some dark room and figure it out when you don't know. When you don't know, it's okay to say, yeah, we don't have any idea. We haven't run into this before. But you know what? We've been doing this for over 20 years, so there's a high probability that we're going to be able to figure this out. And if not, we're going to find another solution that's going to be just as good, if not better.
If I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is it's not a situation where your client treats you as another pair of hands or another 10 pair of hands, but you are on the same level. It's a partnership level where you can have those really honest conversations. And I would assume they aren't always fun to have these conversations because admitting something that you don't know isn't a pleasant experience for humans generally. but how have you found the clients and the different types of clients that you're dealing with react to this approach?
And it depends. If you're dealing with a smaller business, there's a high probability that you're dealing with the owner, and it's the owner's money. So there's a very personal attachment to that. So the sooner you can get away from dealing with clients where there's that personal attachment to their money, the conversations are a lot easier. When it's that person's, they're looking at like, oh, I was going to buy my kid a new car or new Nikes or whatever it is. So there's that attachment. But the best way to do is just be really direct about it and just put it into whatever their business is. Try to find an analogy that's in there. I mean, that's the premium way to explain it. But other than that, just be really direct. Like, okay, this is what's happening. This is how long it's going to take. And we told you, and that's the important part, setting the expectation up front of those unknowns. The other thing, too, is anytime a stakeholder changes where they're going to bring in somebody else to the project or any types of feature changes, you have to stop the project and you have to have a conversation with them about where it's at, and then don't be afraid to rescope it. Some clients are going to get upset where they think they can't get whatever they want, and those are all things that you have to start at the beginning of the conversation, just explaining. This is how it works. If you bring in somebody else to the project, that's going to be considered a scope change. If you want other features that aren't here, we can go ahead and quote those. We're not trying to nickel and dime you. We're just trying to tell you, we promised we would do this one thing, and now that's changing. Anytime you move the goalpost, it's going to be harder to win the game.
This is so important for people to understand, because scope creep is something everybody in the agency space experiences. And sometimes it's not even something the clients do on purpose, but they just have ideas as projects progress. They see what else could be done, and it's natural that those ideas come to place. The other thing that you've mentioned is that you bring in team members into those conversations, and that's a perfect bridge to finding the right team members and company culture. And that's something that I think you do really well. Otherwise, you wouldn't grow this big. So how do you bring in the right team members that can actually join these conversations? Because from my experience, technical people, like the better they are at tech, no offense, but the worse they are at dealing with humans from time to time.
Yeah, that happens. We're all humans, right? So we have more common than not. So it's making sure you have the other people around them, like a real team approach, so you can have the conversations necessary and just understand what their role is and their function. There's certain technical features that you're going to relay those questions over to them, and you're going to get those answers. They don't have to drive the conversation, but they have to be able to assist and add value when necessary. And another thing to add, we do another thing called it's HBDI, the whole brain thinking. So we test a lot of our leadership team to understand whether they're creative, analytical, emotional, or process-driven, and we've built teams around that type of thinking. So we literally have a whole brain, holistic view of each one of our teams.
That is interesting. Explain more. Like, where did that come from?
So the whole brain concept came from GE, General Electric, and I think it's about like 30, maybe even 40 years old. And what they wanted to do is understand how their team members think, right? There's personality tests, which are going to show you a trait of behaviors, but behaviors change. So there's only so much you can really invest in that. And when it comes to the whole brain thinking, you're understanding how somebody thinks. So when they receive information, this is going to be the thought process that they go through. It's either going to affect them emotionally first, analytically, creatively, or in a process way. And then when you have that, you have 4 quadrants. What you want to do is between 2 people or 3 or 4, you want to build out a whole team with that type of brain. So they're looking and solving problems with each one of those quadrants.
And is that something that you've added because at some point it became evident that a team isn't functioning well? Or is that something that you saw randomly and you thought that might be a good fit?
Like most of the greatest things that have happened to me, they're pretty random. We have a group called the Digital Mastermind. We had a speaker that came in and he said, "Hey, I'd like to do this test on you." And I was like, "All right." And he's like, "Yeah, and I'd like to show everybody your results." I was like, "Okay, well that'll be great. We're literally going to sit in front of a live audience and we're going to talk about the way that I think." in any event, we started with that, and then we did my business partner, and then we went ahead and just started doing other members of our team. And it really, there was no resistance, which is interesting, because I've done personality tests in the past with team members, whether it was Myers-Briggs or DISC, and when that happens, people are like, whoa, very resistant, because those are the ways that you behave, and maybe there's some judgment around that, but nobody was judgmental about the way that they think, which ironically you think they would be more concerned with that. And we did the test, and everybody that took it, even myself, you're like, oh, wow, all of that is true. It confirms what you already know about the way that you think, and then it tells you, okay, when you get stressed out, this is what you tend to do. So there's some people that go really emotional, right? They get upset, they cry, they pout. And then there's other people that get really analytical, where they dig in and they're like, okay, well, I got to really solve this. Some people are more process-driven, which is like justice, where they want justice in solving this. Weirdly enough, mine doesn't move. So if I get stressed, which I thought it was like broken when I took it, because I was the first one, and then my team members take it, and then it's like all over the map. And I was just like, okay, yeah, I'm usually pretty cool under pressure.
And this is so important. Would you say that this is being able to deal with pressure is something that comes natural to you, or is that something you've learned in growing Oyova?
You know, I think it always came natural. I think I was always, when something would go wrong, I was first to just really just be cool and try to figure it out. So I think that is something that I've continued to grow on. Now the downside of that is that can make you into a procrastinator, because no matter what, you're going to be able to figure it out at the last minute. You're going to be cool, calm, and cavalier. So I think that's a warning. And I don't advocate for procrastination, but I do advocate for people making the right decision at the best time. And I've seen some agencies get too forward into something where they were like a first mover on it, but they didn't realize what the landscape looked like. You can even take platforms, for instance. There's a ton of platforms that people are like, oh, this is going to be the latest and greatest thing. Well, when you make that type of shift, whether it's project management or a CMS, you're betting. And okay, well, you could be a first mover, but you're gambling, and when you gamble like that, you can lose a lot of time, a lot of money, and people, because they might not want to make that shift. So I'm a big advocate for making the best decision at the right time, not too soon or not too late.
And that's exactly what we are seeing right now with all these AI tools coming out. Like, I see tons and tons of businesses building their entire marketing structure on GPT. What do you do if GPT-4 goes away in 3 months? Like, you have no knowledge, you have no ability to think critically, you've just relied on this black box that magically put out all the sales copy and the web copy for you. Like, navigating those changes is really, really difficult. What are some of the criteria, some of the decision-making factors that you use or the team uses to identify this is a good trend to follow and this is a trend we would rather wait on and see how it's developing?
I think it's making business cases. How is this going to make us money? How is this making us money? What is the impact on us going to be? When you're on the bleeding edge and you're an innovator, there's like, 1% of people that they're going to say a genius, and then there's just millions of miles of people that are just morons because they jumped into something too quick, right? So you can get lucky, and that's fine if that's, but I want to try to save our luck for all the other organic bad things that just naturally occur and move a little bit slower. So we've dipped our toe, and we're using AI tools and whatnot, but we haven't literally just bought the farm and made sure that that's exactly what we're going to do. What we're looking at is just having it replace inputs. But if it comes to any other type of platform, we'll just experiment on a very low level and see what that impact is going to be, and then we'll go ahead and move on it. If you think about it, there's so many like cliches, like whether it's the first one through the wall is the bloodiest, the second mouse gets the cheese. You could take Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs didn't invent one of the products that he had. He just waited and looked at everybody else's mistakes and filled the gap. So it's typically that the second and third, and the person that's standing back that's actually going to attack the market in the right way to get the most from it.
Yeah, and that's very similar to the approach that Conversio has with the hosting too. Rather than embracing the latest tech, build something that is rock solid and that can evolve as things change and as technology progresses, but always focus on this core service and on keep the quality as high as possible, rather than just trying to be new just for the sake of being new.
I think it's the difference between reactionary and being reacting and responding. I look at reacting as just something jarring that you're going to put a Band-Aid on a shotgun wound. I look at responding as adapting to the situation. And when you can adapt, I think you offer something that has more integrity and more value for all the stakeholders.
Yeah, that is a great frame. Continuing on that note, how do you adapt the types of services that your agency delivers? Because you do web development, you do content development, you do SEO and all those things. When is it the right time to add to a service, and when is it the right time to remove something?
I think it starts with value to the client and what the impact is going to be. So, for instance, we can build a fantastic website, but if we're not building it in such a performant way where it's going to either be fast enough or ADA compliant, there's going to be some negative outputs for the client. So what we do is, all right, we're going to build this thing to be incredibly fast and it's going to be super performant. And then with that, all right, well, if they're going to SEO the site, well, we might as well incorporate our SEO. As far as the ADA compliant, all right, well, we might as well do the ADA compliant. So we just continually add around the services, around that hub and that website. And if we're going to try something new, instead of hiring it in-house, we'll build a business case and we'll hire a contractor and we'll just do an experiment. And we're going to find out, okay, does this make sense? And either A, we use the contractor and we either offer them, hey, do you want to come on full time? Or B, we just continue contracting that service, but it's a service that's under our umbrella.
And how do you build those processes when you decided, okay, this is something new we want to add? How do you document? How do you choose the tools and things like that?
Tools are usually recommended by the team, and there's usually some type of experiment that we're running where somebody's doing like a trial of some sort. And it's usually a paid. It's not like we're going to make this decision in 30 days. We'll probably look at it for like three months or 6 months. And there's a business case there. How is this going to make us money as a company? And I think that's a part of it. The other process piece is we have a process document, which is essentially like our Bible of how we run the company. And it's probably like 60 or 70 pages. So in there we have every process from hiring to firing to vacations to all of our tools and plugins to when, if you want to hire a new employee, how to build a business case. It's just completely laid out, and it's something that we build on. And the people that are in charge of those teams or certain departments write the processes for their teams.
And that sounds rather low tech. Sometimes you see companies spin off 500 Notion pages that are all linked together and stuff like that. Yours sounds more like a Google document or
That's
Word
exactly what it
document
is.
for that matter.
Yeah, and it's the function too, and I think that's the important part of whether design is important, whether it's a website or a business or anything. If you have 500 pages of something, what's the control on that? Who's going to read that? How are you going to do it? And we got this idea from a friend who's had a couple of very successful agencies. He always stayed at Ritz, and he's like, man, at a Ritz-Carlton, they really get it right. His name's Gabe Julin. He owns Digital Silk, and he said that, yeah, they always get it right. And he asked, he's like, how do you do this? Well, every single day they would review their processes, each team. Like, so they are on it. No matter what, they're just top notch. He adopted that to every week. I don't think we necessarily do it every week, but it is something that team members are required to know our processes and the conditions of the way that we do our work. So we document all of it, and we just follow it as close as we possibly can to deliver.
That's really insightful. How do you train your team members to follow those, and then how do you make sure they stay on track?
So unfortunately, the main reason is when something goes off the rails. And I wouldn't say completely like dumpster fire, but if something's wrong, it's like, hey, did you follow the process? It's like, well, no. It's like, okay, well, if you follow the process, it tends to work out the way that it should. So it's a continual check-in. Or when somebody asks a question, instead of answering it with the response, is like, have you checked the process document yet? Creating those habits are really important. And the other thing too is other team members helping others, like, hey, how do we do this? Well, here, this is the process. They can show them how to do it. And just really knowing, it removes a lot of the creative thinking necessary, and we already have the problem solved, so it makes us more efficient as a company. So I'd say the best answer to your question is teams supporting, as well as the individual managers telling them to look into the process document and encouraging others to make the process better if they can.
Sounds like a very healthy company culture that you have going on right there.
Yeah, we've had, knock on wood, I'm a bit superstitious. We've had a lot of our employees and clients for a long time. We've had some employees over 10 years and some clients as well. So I think it really shows in the way that we treat people and communicate.
Yeah. How do you treat vendors and software platforms that could be partners like GitHub Copilot, for example, or a hosting company, or any software that you use for a reasonable amount of time and that has an impact? How do you evaluate those tools? Is that also business case related, or are there other factors too?
I think it's business case, right? So if we're using something now and we're going to change, what is the adoption on that going to be? So we're going to look at factors like that. And if there is another tool where, whether it's even a plugin that we're going to use site-wide on all new builds or something like that, then we're going to look at, okay, well, what is this going to cost? How, insofar as just, in dollars as well as time. So I think it's a lot in that realm. As far as the relationships with them, like with WooCommerce and Shopify and some of these others, we try to be as involved as we can to where it makes sense to create a feedback loop. Hey, these are things that are important to us, and then having them educate us on whatever is necessary so we can be the best at what we do.
Do you find that those connections behind the scenes, like with the dev team of WooCommerce, for example, have a meaningful impact on your day-to-day? Is it something that came in handy in the past?
I don't know about in the day-to-day, but I know in specific instances it has, and I can't think of any examples at the moment, but I know the team having those relationships also creates a more, I would say, professional, connected, expert position in what they do. Because that way you're not creating the comparison of just like, oh, those people are doing it better. When you're more involved and you have your sleeves rolled up, you're like, okay, all right, we're doing the best that we can do. And you can understand where you stand in your field. Because I don't know if you worked at some agencies where there's people like, oh, this agency is doing this and it's amazing and so on and so forth. And they're continually thinking the grass is greener. And then you actually know people at that agency and you're like, dude, I mean, they're just like us. They're doing it the best that they can. And they might have produced something that's a little bit prettier than what we have. So it's just really making sure that the team understands that we're giving them everything that they need so they can be the best, and then creating the space so they can actually perform at that level.
Yeah. So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that it's rather a nice to have a kind of a security layer underneath the operations, that if you had to get in touch with them, you can, and that clients also actively embrace that as a quality factor of working with you rather than with some agency who doesn't have those connections.
Yeah, I would.
Nice. And how do you attract those types of clients that can afford to drop 25, 50,000 on a website project? I think we all strive to having fewer clients and bigger projects because that's just a more predictable business and a more growth-oriented business model. What was your journey to getting there? I don't imagine you started with charging 100K for a website.
No, but I'm also a firm believer of just charge for the work. Don't give it away for free. And I think that's a big issue where people are undervaluing what they're doing. So if you came to us and said, I only have $10,000, what could you do? We would say, this is what $10,000 gets you. That's important, right? It's not like, oh, well, we have a $60,000 minimum. Like, no, okay, well, that's fine. And if that's the way that you've built your company, then good for you. That's wonderful. So I think it's just really looking at it like it's gas in the tank and just explaining, all right, you have goals, and if your goals align with your budget, then we can almost do anything for you. So we're really clear about that. And as far as finding the clients, it's just really good relationships usually. So there's a lot of referrals that happen from people that are in specific spaces. So that is one. And also experience. You're not going to be able to build a $50, $60, $100, $200,000 website for somebody if you really haven't done something like that before. And I would say the other is we're pretty aggressive in our marketing, whether it's outreach and then targeting businesses that we want to work with, as well as really good partnerships, having other tangential partners that offer a specific service that don't do what we do, like some really sexy design agencies that do really good work, but they can't do some of the back-end things that we can do. We lean into our professional expertise, and that goes a long way in getting referrals from them as well.
I would love to hear about a story where outreach has gone really well, and one where you can maybe share a story where you've learned something about the outreach, because I think that's something people don't do enough. There's this whole story where we build a brand and the clients come to us. But until you get there, until you have this network of referrals and the standing in the industry, it's all you going to the leads and working the leads.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And even you're going to have these, there's very few agencies even that are going to have more work than they know what to do with. And if they do, it's probably that they don't have their growth aligned with their capacity. And we've fallen into that position in the past, and we changed some things. So I think it's really important to be aggressive with your marketing. So if somebody's starting an agency, they're smaller right now, I think it's figuring out their niche and whatever it is that they can deliver. And the difference is there's got vertical niches, right? So vertical niches, all right, we're working with vet clinics, or we're working with only nonprofits, or so on and so forth. Then you have your horizontal niches, right? You have, all right, we do SEO, and we only do WordPress dev, or so on and so forth. And then when you're targeting, you need to be very specific in how you can help somebody. So if you're going to target at a company, you're going to let them know that they're going to work with them. Find something of value and realize that it's not going to be just a really quick situation. It's going to take a little bit of time to nurture them. You're going to have to show them that you're capable of doing whatever it is that you say you're going to do. And give as many case studies and references as possible along the way. It's not easy, and you're going to have to learn from your mistakes. You're going to have people send you, if you're doing cold email, I've gotten some horrible email responses. Like, dude, people are drawing pictures of like me hanging from a tree and stuff. I was like, all right, well, whatever. And if you're going to pick up the phone, granted, not a whole lot of people are picking up the phone today, which means less of your competitors are going to be calling. So if that's something that you want to do, I'm a big advocate for it. Just make sure that when you connect with that person, that you're going to be able to state something that's going to show them why you're worthy of working with them. But don't give up. I think that's everybody, right? Everybody gives up. Going back to other businesses, I've seen tons of people just try something for like a week and then that's it. No, like give it like a real hard 3 months and just figure out how to make it work, because other people are making it work.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about cold calling, picking up the phone. That's one thing. I think that from a sales and business development perspective, that's the biggest thing you can do. If you know how to sell on the phone and get past the gatekeeper, you can scale to any level that you want. Granted, of course, that you fulfill on those promises that you make on the phone. But if you have a strong tech team in the background that can handle the development and the delivery, I think cold calling is truly a supercharger that puts fuel on the fire right there.
Absolutely. I agree. And I don't think enough people do it. And if you're aggressive, and I don't mean aggressive like being mean, I mean aggressive and just going and doing it, people appreciate tenacity to a point. So they're like, all right, dude, I'll give you the time. Okay, let's just have a conversation. Let's see what you got here.
I got a job offering the other day. I was cold calling a client here, or a lead here in Germany, and then he said, like, if you're ever looking for a job, nobody does cold calling these days, but we do. So if you are looking for a job, let's have a conversation. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But it speaks to the level of grit that you have to have as an entrepreneur these days. And bridging to the technology side of things, it's the same thing. Like, you have to have the right tools, the right stack, and the right partners, be it a vendor, be it a plugin provider, be it an agency, as you mentioned, that you partner up with. What are some of the lessons you've learned on the tech side of things that you can share without going into detail too much?
That if it's the latest and greatest thing, it probably is just full of bugs, and you're just going to get yourself into an expensive problem. What are some of the other things? I mean, I know you're for the hosting company. Solid hosting partnerships are really important. And we've had some really good ones in the past. And still
what is it that you're looking out for when it comes to picking a hosting provider?
I think the tooling and the processes that you can put around it. So we work with Pressable and WP Engine are the ones that we work with the most. And it's essentially, all right, what is their infrastructure? What support do they have? How much control do we get over what it is that we want to do? And I think those are the main two drivers, yeah. And I have other people on my team that could probably speak to it well, in spades more than I could.
Well, it's not your job as the chief revenue officer
to
know everything about the
conversations I see it, but yeah, tangentially, yeah, there's other people that they could speak to it immensely more and name people over at these wonderful companies.
Yeah, but it's very important. I agree that if you scale, you know that you have the right partners and the right hosting provider for that matter, or it could be a security provider too, like a web application firewall you install on the websites. Could be knowing that the GitHub is not going away for managing your code. Could be knowing that VS Code isn't going away for coding and things like that. When it comes to project management, what's your take there? Because you can spin that off in 5,000 different directions.
Yeah, I think a good project manager is worth their weight in gold. And I think it's understanding the function of the project manager. It's to make sure things are delivered when they say they're going to be delivered and solve whatever problems that arise. And solving the problems, too, is not necessarily that person specifically solving the problem. It's finding the person that can and bringing them into the conversation. And then there's tons of different project management platforms. And there's tons of different hosting providers and all these things. I think the most important thing is figuring out what works best for your team and business. Every business is like a fingerprint, right? They're all going to be different. So we're going to look at all these other companies, but treat it like a buffet. Pull the things out that work best for you. And I think we do a really good job with project management because we have an account manager, we have a team lead, and then we have a project manager. So in between anything that's going on, there's multiple minds that can really solve something. There's no, like the cliche, the single point of failure where somebody just gets hit by a bus. Somebody can always take a vacation. Somebody can always pick up and make sure that it's done. I think when you put all the weight on one person, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So I recommend spreading it around multiple talented people. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more on that. And what's the client experience like working with you?
They just love us. I don't know what else to say.
I think didn't expect anything else.
No, the client experience, I think we're very white glove. So yeah, we have over 90. I think we're at 96 clutch reviews now that are like 4.9 or higher. And the client relationship is we're pretty direct about what's going on, and we're gentle about it. And we over communicate, so we continually let them know where they are in the project, and then we fill gaps, right? So if they're not going to get us something, we'll make an attempt at a decision. And what I mean by that is, let's say that it's something like infinitesimal that happened the other day. It was these pictures, these trucks for this construction company. And they wouldn't tell us, for whatever reason. I think they got backed up. What these trucks were, we didn't even know. So the team member went ahead and just did some research and guessed. They were like some very specialty trucks. Completely wrong. But the client was really happy, because that was the impetus to get them to actually say, no, it's actually these trucks. So we attempted, we didn't publish, but we said, like, hey, are these the right trucks or whatever, just to help them along. And I think those things are very important, where you don't just throw up your hands and say, oh, no, well, if you're not going to get it to us, just really trying to serve and get the project over the finish line however you can. And I know people say like going above and beyond, but I think it's just being a really good partner with them and being a good human. Like, yeah, who knows, man? They could be firing somebody, or they may have lost a client on their end, and they don't necessarily have to share that. But let's go ahead and do what we can do to really fill in that gap. And I think our clients are very appreciative of that.
I can see how that's also setting you apart from many other agencies, because just from my own perspective in this industry, there are many people who rely on the clients to provide copy and images and all that stuff, and that's well and good, but unless you really accept those potential delays, you need to create this urgency. And I see, just from a psychological perspective, if a client sees something wrong on the website that they are working on and they are spending good money on, it's easier to fix something that's wrong than to create something from scratch.
Yep, exactly. It's like ChatGPT, right? It's not going to give you the end product. And then with that too, with agencies that are not providing content, always offer it. And in some cases, maybe even change your process to you always write the content, because that's always going to be your biggest delay.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. And let's address the elephant in the room before we wrap up.
Yeah.
What's your take on writing code with GPT or Copilot? I saw the other day that I think 47% of all GitHub code is now written with Copilot. And that's like 7 months in. So how do you see this pan out?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's going to be solving a lot of problems. It's going to fix, we're using it to fix bugs. We're loading it in and then it's finding errors or telling you how to tighten up your code. So I think it's fantastic. And I think, and this is the important thing too, where you still need to know everything about your space, even if you're going to use these tools. And you got to stay sharp, because these things, there's going to be gaps that can't be fixed. It's just not going to know. And it's going to take a human to go in and figure out what that is. And that's going to be paid at a premium. And you're only going to know that if you really know the full landscape. It's for instance, when people just get really strong on a platform and they actually don't know, like HTML or CSS, or they don't know whether it's going to be more database stuff on like Python, or they don't know like C#. Those are the people that actually know the ins and outs there, that use these tools to augment and make them more efficient, that are going to be a premium, because they're still going to be able to dig in and solve those things that others aren't going to be able to solve, because they're going to be so lenient on these tools. Well, the tool told me this, and they're going to throw up their hands. It's like, oh yeah, well cool, you're the other guy. All right, we're the ones that actually get the job done. You want to be the one that gets the job done.
Did you have to convince team members of using it because they were afraid that they'd be replaced or something like that?
I think there's that inherent fear, but the example I give team members, and we're not at the complete forefront. We're using this, and it's something that we're embracing at this time. But if you were the best accountant before the calculator or the spreadsheet, and you wouldn't use a spreadsheet and you wouldn't use a calculator once they came out, well, you're now probably the worst accountant. And the worst accountant is probably light years ahead of you. So I think it's just really embracing these tools to make sure that you're going to be the best, and not be afraid, because what is your fear going to do? Is this a protest? Is this your rebellion? Like, it's still going to happen without you. You're not going to stop this thing. So I think it's really getting ahead of it and surfing the wave rather than letting it drown you.
Fantastic way to wrap up this conversation, Jon. Where do people get in touch with you the best?
You can visit us at oyova.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jon, and then my last name, Tsourakis. And reach out. Yeah, I love connecting with new people and helping wherever I can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No, thank you, Jan. It's a pleasure.
And let's stop this.